Hi, this is Doc Russ for Lose Weight for Good. Last night we had a really terrific teleseminar for our Lose Weight for Good members, and we talked about what it was like to get stuck and how to get unstuck. You know what I'm talking about. You have a result that you want to get in your life. You want to lose weight, but you just can't seem to do the things necessary to get there. That's stuck. And some people start out great. I mean, they start out and they're all excited and they got all this energy and they do all these great things, and all of a sudden, bam, their weight loss stops and they're stuck. They don't know what to do. Well, as it turns out, there are ways to help people get unstuck. And I thought this information was so valuable, I wanted to share it with you. Well, the first thing you have to realize is that very, very few people want to lose weight. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of people want to weigh less, but very few people really want to go through the pain and the agony of changing the behaviors necessary to weigh less. So the first thing to understand is that the result is connected to the behaviors. As a matter of fact, as my friends over at Vital Smarts are so fond of saying, your world is perfectly engineered to give you the results you're currently getting. If you want different results, we're going to need to change the engineering. Now, Lose Weight for Good, we talk about updating operating systems. And the first operating system is the betterness operating system, and that's what goes on right up here. And of course, there's also operating systems that go on outside your brain. But today, we're going to focus on how to update this. So, when I first started as a weight loss coach, I helped people by telling them what I did to lose over 200 pounds. I gave them all of my techniques. And as it turned out, it didn't help very much. I mean, people lost weight, but they gained it back, and you're familiar with that cycle, right? Well, what happened, what I realized, is that my techniques were unique to me. And that while they were useful and helpful, they were really tailor-made for me. So what I needed to do is I needed to look underneath those techniques and see if there was a process that led for those techniques to happen and work for me. And as it turns out, I wasn't the only one asking these questions. In fact, these questions had already been asked and researched. At the University of Rhode Island, Drs. James Petruska, Carlo Di Clemente, and John Norcross had actually started to study the behaviors of people who had successfully undergone massive behavior change. And what they discovered is that everyone who goes under behavior change follows a certain set of stages. Now, while their stages are named a little differently, mine, as they're named, spell out the word ready. R-E-A-D-Y. So the very first stage of change is the R phase, and I call it refusal. And in this stage, you don't even want to know you have a problem. And you've probably met people like this. I'll use smoking as an example. Have you ever met a smoker who would say things like, oh, well, smoking isn't going to hurt me, or, my grandfather smoked till he was 142 years old and nothing ever happened to him? Or they would find ways to change the subject, or they would get angry when you brought up their smoking. Well, chances are they were in refusal. The next stage is called exploration. Now, a lot of times these refusal people, maybe somebody really close to them, will die of lung cancer, and that person will have been a smoker, and they will have figured out, maybe there's some connection between them dying of lung cancer and the smoking. And that event might trigger them off to go exploring. And they'll start to learn everything they can about lung cancer. Maybe they'll even go and talk to friends of theirs who were smokers but now have emphysema. And maybe they will even, learn about the statistics about how frequently people who smoke die young. The next phase is they will go and they will start to acquire. They will acquire resources necessary to make this behavior change. Now, these resources could be physical. They may go out and buy some nicotine gum or get a prescription for a nicotine patch, or they could be social. They may start to surround themselves with people that don't smoke. Or they could even be just more information about things they could specifically do, maybe learning about a non-smoking program that they could join, all in the acquire phase. But you know what? Nothing really happens until somebody gets off their butt and does something. And in the do phase, that's where the behaviors really start to change. In other words, all this navel gazing up here is all very helpful and all very useful, but doesn't really change anything until you do something. And if you do something enough, if you actually repeat it often enough, you'll find that you enter the last phase, which is the you phase. And that's where this behavior becomes such a part of your identity that you really will have become a different person. For instance, you ever meet a smoker who became a non-smoker? And they entered the use phase. It's now part of their new identity that they're a non-smoker. And they get crazy when somebody lights up a cigarette. Like, even if it's in another state. Like, for instance, somebody could light up a cigarette right now in New Jersey, and if one of these people was standing next to me, they'd be like, oh my God, those people in New Jersey, they're so inconsiderate. Can't they see I'm breathing over here? You know what I'm talking about. But 6 months ago, these people were refusing to believe that smoking was even a problem. And now, they've completely changed their identity. If you know one of these people, you know what I'm talking about. So the interesting thing about these stages is that you don't necessarily stay in one place. Yes, you progress this way, obviously. But sometimes you can progress backwards. So for instance, you may be doing a regular exercise program and then all of a sudden you wake up and it's been 3 months and you haven't done any exercise. Oh my goodness, you've been thinking about it. And maybe you've even been buying new sneakers, but you're not doing anything. So it happens sometimes that you could be in the doing phase and you could slide back and you could slide forward. In fact, the research shows that this happens multiple times, as many as 5, 6, or 7 times. And you know what? It's normal and it's okay. But the idea is to keep progressing to the do phase until you do it long enough that it becomes part of your new identity. Does that make sense so far? Great. The one thing that almost never happens, though, is very few people go back from exploration, acquisition, or doing to refusal. In other words, you can't unknow what you know. Once these people are enlightened, they normally don't go back to that stage. But what I did find really interesting is that some people who are stuck are in refusal and they don't even know it. Let me explain what I mean. You see, every result in your life is the sum total of all the behaviors that go into making up that result. In other words, your entire weight problem is a result of the things you do or the things you don't do that you should be doing that have all added up to give you the exact number on the scale. So let's say, for instance, that you got 10 behaviors down here in the do phase, all 10. And that because of those 10 behaviors, you lose 25 pounds. Hey, congratulations, by the way, 25 pounds is a big deal. So you lost 25 pounds, but then you stop. And you're confused as all get out because you're still doing these 10 same behaviors. You're doing them great and you're saying, I'm doing everything I can do, but I can't lose any more weight. I'm stuck. Well, guess what? There's a pretty good chance that you have reached the maximum benefit from those 10 behaviors. So that you keep doing them is going to keep giving you the same result. If you're plateauing and you've got your 10 behaviors in the do or the you phase, that's great news. You have now learned to maintain your weight, which is probably one of the biggest problems that we confront as chronic weight losers. But now you have a bigger problem. You want to lose more weight. Well, guess what? It's time to step up your game. It's time to look at your behaviors again and realize that a few are probably in the refusal phase. Well, how do you know that? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to raise your awareness about your own behavior. Start looking at your behavior and ask yourself, am I willing to discuss this particular behavior? If the answer is no, if the answer is that if there's something that you're doing that you kind of know might be bad for your weight loss, but you just do not want to talk about it, refusal. That's right. How about this? Are you well informed about this behavior? For instance, if you love going to the movies every week and you love getting extra butter on the popcorn, do you really know the effect of that extra butter on your pop? Do you really know the effect of that extra butter on your body? Or do you really know the effect of that extra butter on your weight? I shouldn't say that, I suppose. If the answer is no, if you see an article about popcorn butter and you put it away, or if you see a commercial about drippy, oily popcorn butter and you turn it off, there's a pretty good chance you're in refusal. Now, let me ask you this. Are you willing to accept the consequences of your actions? In other words, if you're going to go to the movie every week, are you willing to be okay with staying where you are? The chances are no. Chances are no. So if you can answer yes to those three questions, there's a pretty good chance that that behavior is in the refusal stage, and you may want to think about progressing it to do. If you can get just one more behavior into the do column, who knows? You could lose more weight. You know, as I was thinking about giving you guys this lecture, I thought, you know what, maybe I should try to find an example of a refusal behavior in my very own life. And as it turns out, it's not easy to do. I kept thinking and thinking and thinking, and I thought, well, I'm doing everything right. And then I realized, I was driving down the road, and I noticed a billboard for stop texting while driving. And my immediate impulse was to kind of gaze the other way. And then I realized it. Oh my gosh, I text while I'm driving. It seems silly now, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit it, but I really do. And then I started to think back. And Karen, oh God, Karen loves me so much. And she constantly tries to tell me how dangerous texting and driving is. And she constantly tries to tell me that she doesn't want to lose me because I got into a car accident while I was texting. And what happened? I got angry. I thought, she's trying to control me. She's just nagging me. Bam! There's your trigger. If you think people are trying to control you and trying to nag you, and you're not seeing their input as helpful, chances are you're in refusal. And I started to think about what would happen if I did get into a car accident. What would the effect of those actions be? What if I killed somebody on a bicycle? What if I wrapped my car around a tree and killed myself? Leave my kids fatherless? I couldn't bear to live with that. I couldn't bear to think about that. And all of a sudden, I started to go into exploration. And I started to look a little more carefully at that don't text and drive billboard, and there was a picture of this lovely young lady who had been killed because she was texting and driving. It changed my whole perspective, just realizing that I was in refusal about that behavior. And I realized that this exercise, this lecture, might just have saved my life. So the other thing that I want to tell you before I go is that if you're embarrassed about your behavior, remember I was telling you that I'm embarrassed to tell you that I was texting and driving. I'm embarrassed. And that's probably a trigger. It's a behavior that you want to get rid of. Another way to find out if there's a behavior you want to get rid of is, would you want your kids to do it? I don't want my kids to text and drive, and you probably don't want yours either. So ask yourself these critical questions. Raise your consciousness and try to find a few behaviors that you're in refusal about. And there's a pretty good chance that if you get down to this stage, you're going to lose more weight. This is Doc Russ, hoping that this video helps you lose weight for good.